Okay. All right. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a good 4th of July. I think you guys are all finished with your A-term classes. So I think this is all you're left with for July. So I hope that that makes your lives a little bit easier, and always, easier to manage is always a good thing. So last week, we're gonna pick up where we left off last week. I gave a very rushed and incomplete kind of synopsis of correlational research last week, and I want to pick up there. I've had some time to think on it and get you guys in a bit of a better place for understanding correlational research. And I also want to go back and talk about a couple of the overarching themes that we see between single subject research, experimental research, and correlational research, and why those are the preferred methods of research that we see in educational research overall. I'll spend a little bit of time at the end kind of talking about where we are in terms of the, actually no, I'll do that now, where we are in terms of the class, what we're going to look like for the next couple of weeks, and we'll see. That should just about bring us to 4 o'clock. Okay. All right. So on Moodle, I'll go ahead and share Moodle just so you guys can all follow along. On Moodle right now, that I apologize, this says quiz 6. It should be quiz 8, your correlational research quiz. I need to just renumber those overall. We're in week 6. We're talking about correlations now. Week 7 and 8 on Moodle are really it. I'm going to do a lecture next week on the writing of the method section, similar to how I did for the lit review. And then we really have a quick wrap up before everything is due in. What I would like to do for week 8 is give those that want an opportunity to present some of their lit reviews and method sections in class. Now, I recognize that this is an online class, and not so much that it's been sparsely attended in person, which is totally fine, but not everyone has been on in person. But I would like to give people an opportunity to share what they are thinking with everyone else to the degree that everyone is comfortable. So what I'm actually going to do is provide some bonus point opportunities for presenting in class. So that will occur on week 8, which is the 20th. So 2 weeks from today, which will kick off that final week, leading up to turning in of our final projects. So in terms, so you guys can prepare in terms of your scheduling and your coursework. I am going to, I'll edit this as I go. So this week we do have the correlational research. I'm keeping the method section draft here because I want you guys to see that should be turned in sooner rather than later. It is just a draft, so you can get some feedback. I'm going to be going through and hopefully providing feedback over the next couple of days on some of your previous assignments. Week 7 and 8, let me edit this to reflect more a little bit. Files, chapters, and final projects. So week 7 lecture, methods, I'll do and discussion section wrap up. Week 8 will be presentation opportunities, and then we have all of that stuff ready to go. So for your final projects, there's three, and I'm not going to do this. Hi. There are three main components that we're going to have. So you'll have your final project, which is your literature review and your method section. There is going to be a reflection. And then there are these chapters in the back of your text, which is at home, not sitting in front of me. There are the remaining chapters in the text are all about qualitative research. So we've obviously focused on quantitative research throughout the semester. However, I don't want to minimize the presence of qualitative research in educational settings. Now, I am not a qualitative researcher. I don't want to pretend to be an expert on the ins and outs of qualitative research. I feel like I have a pretty good command of quantitative research, but not so with qualitative. It's a completely different way of looking at the world. It's a completely different way of looking at research. And I do want you guys to have an opportunity to, with some sort of structure, at least expose yourself to those concepts. So for this assignment, I want you to choose any two of those final chapters of the text, 12 through 17. Each of those chapters is a different type of qualitative research. And I want you to just read through whichever one interests you and provide a review of it. So you're looking at a general summary of the type of research, what are the key points, possible applications, and any questions that you may have around those designs. It says, I'm removing the posting. So you will not have to do that. So hopefully that makes some amount of sense. All right. So you have two chapter reviews from chapters. So sorry, starting back up here. Quiz, whatever quiz this actually is. I guess it is quiz 8. Here's 6, 7, here's 8. On correlational research after today and reading chapter 11. Your method section draft, getting that in sooner rather than later. And then your three final projects. So your chapter reviews, the final project overall, the final reflection. I'm going to review the final reflection, and I will make sure it's what I want it to be, and I will go over that with you guys next week. I believe everything is due on, let's see, when is the 28th? Yeah, Wednesday. That might be pushing it for me. Hang on one second. Let me see when I have to have your guys' grades in. That's really what determines everything for me. That's not what I want. There we go. Look at the calendar. My apologies. Right. Yeah, okay. The 28th should be good. Grades are due 9 a.m. on Monday, August 2nd. So yes, so everything will be due on the 28th, and we will go from there. All right. So that 28th will apply for all any kind of late work if you do have anything that still needs to be done, but then that's when the chapter reviews, the final project, and the final reflection will be due. Okay. Any questions, Sid or Claire?
So the final project consists of the literature review and the methods together, the reflection, and then the chapter reviews.
Yeah, but look at them as three separate assignments. But yes, those are the three things that will be due on the 28th.
Okay.
And if it's not on Moodle right now, nothing else other than what is on Moodle will be assigned.
Okay, gotcha. I just
Okay.
wanted to be sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. All right, so let's talk a little bit about correlational research. So if you remember, in single subject research and experimental research, what we did was try to use the concept of a control group or control participant or a control, whatever it was, to determine whether or not a specific variable had a causal relationship with a dependent variable. All right. So a couple of examples that we may have looked at or looked at something similar. Let's say I'm doing a single subject design. Oh, I had that chart up last time, and I didn't do whatever I said I was going to do with that. So I apologize about that. Let's say I have a couple of students that I'm going to do a reading fluency intervention with. My student is reading at this rate, and this rate, and this rate, and they're stable. And then I do my intervention, and their reading rates increase. And while I'm doing this intervention, I continue my baselines for my other two students. And I do my intervention for my second student. And think of on the dotted line, that's when the intervention is occurring. So I'm just graphing my dependent variable here, not my independent variable, not my intervention. And this guy's rate goes up. This guy's rate was already pretty high. And I do my intervention and it goes up. So nice, clean example with no issues here. What we see is low, stable baseline, intervention, increased rate. We have a low, stable baseline, but while the intervention is occurring, as well as my post-intervention up here, I'm continuing to measure without intervention here. And that's showing this space is serving as a control, as is this space, for my first participant. So I'm using the data from participant 2 and participant 3 to be able to imply that without intervention, participant 1's behavior would not have changed either, because participant 2 and participant 3's did not. And the reason I can do that is because participant 1, 2, and 3 are all similar in enough ways so that they represent each other. I do intervention for participant 2. His reading rate increases. That's great. Participant 3 serves as the control for participant 2. I do my intervention for participant 3. It increases. And we have the same results replicated 3 different times. So again, participant 2 and 3 served as my control group for participant 1. Participant 3 served as my control group for participant 2. And that what the implication there is that without intervening, all 3 participants would have remained low and stable, or at the same levels that they were prior to the intervention. And this allows me, and this is an example again of single subject design. It's not the only single subject design, but this allows me to say that my reading intervention is causal to the changes in reading rates that we see in these 3 participants. Some benefits of single subject design. One, it's very doable by researchers in classrooms. It's very easy for a teacher to use some to do this type of research in their own classroom. Number two, it is the findings are very accurate to the participants that you worked with, meaning that if I have participants like participant 1, 2, and 3, I am likely to see similar types of results. All right. Some cons to single subject research. The primary one being I cannot make any generality about these findings beyond participants that are like participant 1, 2, and 3. If these are second graders, I cannot make any generality for how this reading intervention will work with preschoolers or with high schoolers. I can only say it about second graders. I'm going to be relying on some other researcher to come along and do the same type of thing with middle schoolers or high schoolers or preschoolers to see if they can replicate their results with with another population. Another con is this doesn't say anything about this reading intervention versus any other reading interventions. I can only examine this one variable at a time. All right, so a couple of different pros, a couple of different cons on single subject design. Very, very quick overview. Hopefully your book gave you a good enough understanding. I don't want to say a pure understanding, but a good enough understanding of some of the different variations and what some of their benefits are and how they can be additive to educational research. The next step was experimental research. And experimental research, for many reasons, has the possibility of being looked at as what we call the gold standard of research. We're learning a lot about that right now with vaccine testing and tests that we are seeing with COVID on treatments, things like that. But the gold standard here is what we call double-blind studies. All right, and what that means in those situations are randomized controlled double-blind studies. So in that situation, the experimenter does not know what treatment one is getting. The participant does not know what treatment one is getting. And all participants are randomly assigned into either a test group or a control group. So ignoring the double-blind sort part of this, because that doesn't really apply in educational research, but the randomization does, the random trials do. So let's say we wanted to test the effectiveness of one curriculum versus another. So I am going to have 400 schools in some, let's say across the country. Let's say 500 schools just to make it easy, all right? So I'm going to identify 500 schools across the country and 10 in each state. And of the 10 in each state, I'm randomly going to assign 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So these 5 got randomly assigned to control. These 5 got randomly assigned to the test group. And then I do that again for the next state. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now I have 10 schools in control, 10 schools in test, and I keep going, right? Till I end up with 250 randomly assigned schools in my control and 250 randomly assigned schools in my test. What the randomization does is it allows for no bias in terms of which participants end up in the control group and which participants end up in the test group. All right. Now with your randomized control, there are a few different ways to test for things. All right. So we want to start with some basic level, and we want to assume that everyone's the same, and then we want to compare the improvements that we see. So let's say that on average, our control group scores that much on a math pretest at the beginning of the year. I'll make let's see if I can get a better line for comparisons purposes. All right. And so this is control, and this is test. All right. And my test group is a little bit below that. All right. So what we need to be able to do right from the start is see, is this difference a significantly meaningful difference? Let's say this is 15% accuracy, and this is 13% accuracy. That 2% is not small, but it's not big either, right? And over 250 schools, what I want to be able to say is that going to be an impactful difference on my outcome? And let's, for the sake of argument here, say that it's not, but I think you'll see why in a minute. All right. So then we do a post test. So the control group gets one curriculum. The test group gets another curriculum. In other, when you're looking at curriculum, there's kind of only one option. You're not going to give a control group no curriculum, right? For no math curriculum for a year. But let's say we are measuring something else, and we have a no intervention group, right? Maybe we do something where it's an additive. So everyone's getting the same curriculum, but this group, the test group, is getting additional curricular support. So in one group, we use the current curriculum for everything. In the other group, we use curriculum plus another curriculum for support. So there are some ways, even in educational research, to do not a placebo, but a no test control group where we don't implement any intervention whatsoever. All right. So in this one, we're giving, this is curriculum 1. This is curriculum 2. And we're trying to see if curriculum 2 is more effective. So we give our post test. And let's put our line across. So here we see improvements in both, but we see additional improvement over here. So let's say this is on average 60%, and this is on average 70%. Now we have to know, is that difference, that 10%, a significant difference? Well, we said that this 2% maybe wasn't, but is this 10% enough? And it's not possible to tell this based on just looking at this graph of averages. We have to use a statistical analysis, which takes into account the number of participants. It takes into account the beginning scores, the ending scores, the amount of improvement. It takes all these things into account and is able to tell us that, and sorry about the chicken scratching, but is this extra 10% a significant enough result to say that curriculum 2 is more effective than curriculum 1? All right. So again, an example of an experimental design where we have randomization of the participants. That randomization allows us to make assumptions about about the equalness of the groups. And that allows us to say that the only variable that could have led to these these changes are the implementation of the curriculum itself. All right. So between single subject design and experimental research in the group design realm, those are the two areas that we want to focus a large portion of our research on. However, there are some situations where it's not reasonable, it's not practical, or it's not ethical to randomly assign certain things. And in those situations, what we have to do is what is called correlational research. Everyone knows the saying, or everyone should know the saying, correlation does not mean causation, or correlation is not causation, or whatever you want to say. And while it's a trope that is often repeated, it is not always heeded. And what I mean by that is in education, in medicine, in a great number of areas in our life, we see correlational research, or rather correlational research is presented to us, and we accept that in the same way that we do experimental research. And we have to not do that. we have to make sure that we have the understanding of what factors were looked at in our correlational research. How big was our population? How well was the study conducted? You have to have some really, really tight standards for correlational research. Otherwise, you will start to draw conclusions from it that are not going to be effective. Let's take let's take a look at an example and see what we can come up with. And Sid and Claire, I'm going to lean on you guys for some thought participation here, even with just the two of you here. All right. So let's say our question is, do the use of computers in classrooms lead to better test scores? This is a very important question. This is a very relevant question to our modern classroom. And I already know that a lot of research has been done on this, and the outcomes of those research, that research, has led to the increased use of Chromebooks and Google Classroom and Google Drive in classrooms, to the point where it's almost ubiquitous, right? You walk into a classroom and you're going to see all these Chromebooks. However, if you've been in those classrooms and you've seen some of the kids working on those Chromebooks and the content that's on there, you might start to question the efficacy of that research. And is it truly beneficial for all students, right? So we're going to use some hyperbole examples and see what we come up with, all right? So let's say it's the early-ish 2000s, and you are a researcher who's just starting to look at computers in classrooms. Typically at that point, we would have one or two computers in a classroom. There was no such thing as an iPad or an iPhone. There were barely any laptops, and they were big and bulky. We're just looking at technology in the classroom. Definitely not the situation that every school has a donor that has purchased these classrooms for these computers for you. And you want to do a big study. You want, let's say you want 1,000 participants, which is going to, 500 of those participants are going to have access to computers in their classroom, and 500 and up. That means for the 500 that are, you have to make sure that they have computers in their classroom. So let's say that that is, I don't know, 20 classrooms. Does that number make sense? 20 classrooms, 25 in a classroom. Let's call it 30 or 35 classrooms. And you do not, as a researcher, you do not have the funds to buy 3 to 5 computers for each of those 35 classrooms. All right. So you decide to look at test scores for classes that have computers and classes that do not have computers. All right. So you go to different schools, you call around the principals, you do all the legwork that you need to do, and you end up with 500 students that have access to computers and 500 no access. You look at test scores, all right? And on average, this the students that do have access to computers are in the 80th percentile, and students with no access to computers are in the 55th percentile on their test scores. There's end of year test scores. What can and can you not? So you look at this and you say access to computers increases test scores. All right. What are some issues? What are some valid statements here? What are you guys' thoughts about this? I'll put it this way. I'll start this way. This is correlational in that we are looking at the presence of two variables and the degree to which they exist together. So here, the presence of schools, of computers, and the presence of higher test scores versus the absence of computers and the absence of higher test scores. All right, so we would, yes, computers, no computers, 80%, 55%, we have a line. All right, that would be our analysis. So what can I say? What can't I say? What are you guys' thoughts?
Well, you don't know like what curriculum they were using in 500 schools. That's a lot. Like that gives a lot of room for differences.
Okay, good, good. So there's curriculum. What else? So I haven't looked at curriculum at all, and my goal is that by having such high numbers and all sorts of different schools, that would have kind of washed out. I'm not saying it does or does not, but that's my thought process. But good. So we have curriculum as one potential issue. What else?
I was gonna say like the kind of prepping they've had with those computers. You know, like getting used to using the computer.
Okay. Okay. So we have no idea what role the computer even played in the classroom, right? All I did was, do you have access to computers? Not how many hours a day do you use them, not what kind of computer labs do you have, not how many, what keyboarding skills. I'm not looking at anything about the computer, right? We may actually see an inverse relationship there, right? Good. What else? You guys are thinking very specifically in good ways. Think a little bit more generally. If I'm a researcher, or if I'm reading this, and I'm let's not even a researcher. I am a principal or a superintendent, and I'm reading this research, and I'm looking at my 10 schools in my district, and I'm saying, okay, you want me to put 3 to 5 computers in every single one of these classrooms. That's a lot of money. So I have to be sure that this is meaningful. How might I critically look at this? Give it a shot.
I'm trying to think. I thought I was going in a direction, but now I'm losing it. I'm like, oh. I was starting to think like, wait, you want me to spend all this money? How do I really know that this
How do I know that if I put these computers in the room, or can I trust that if I put these computers in the room, that it's actually going to raise my test scores by 25%?
Right.
Do I know that? So when we're evaluating correlational research, and thank you guys for putting yourselves out on a limb, I really do appreciate it. When we're evaluating correlational research, we have to think of, does this provide for all the possible factors that might influence the dependent variable, in this case, test scores? So if we have these 500 students, we should have any number of curricula that are being used. There's a caveat to that. If we have these 1,000 students, we should have relative training on computers, right? But if we are not randomly assigning participants to a computer group or a not computer group, and then giving one group computers, there are other variables that access to computers might be indicative of that are more meaningful to outcomes than the presence of computers themselves. Think cynically for a little bit, because that sounds bad, but it's important. What might the presence, if again, remember the year is 2007, the year before the iPhone came out. So technology is not everywhere. All right. What is the presence, or what might the presence of computers in the classroom also be related to?
Would it be like the students' behavior?
Don't think students individually. Larger picture.
Or like research on the different types of programs, like if they're effective, like that?
I'm leading you guys in the wrong direction.
Are you talking about like the fear of teachers? No. Okay, I'm going
to you guys are you're gonna be upset with yourselves when I say it. Presence of computers is going to be related to high socioeconomic districts. It's going to be related to access to computers at home. Sid or Claire, I forget who said it, but training on those computers, and all of the other variables that come with that wealth.
Right.
Right?
Like the low socioeconomic status they won't have that at home to continue their progress at school.
Correct. So let's say that computers are indicative of support or of success, that they are beneficial, but it takes more than the physical presence of a computer in the school. You need the computer at home. You need technology savvy people to help you with it. You need the training. You need this. You need that. Maybe it's all those other factors that make those computers better. So just plopping a computer in your classroom isn't going to do anything. I had, when I was teaching, I was given a smart board. And it was before Promethean would come out, like an actual smart board. And I wasn't given any training on it. It was just put in my classroom. My children had access to a smart board. Check. And there was research saying that smart boards helped teach, and they were great for classrooms. Well, I didn't do anything with it. I turned it around and it had a whiteboard on the back, and I used it as a whiteboard instead of the chalkboard. The presence of that smartboard in my classroom had no impact on my students' success. All right. In this study, there are too many other variables that are related to the presence of computers other than the use of the computer itself. Okay. Now, if I did a study where everyone had computers, all 1,000 students had computers, and I did it this way. Participant 1, this kind of chart. Participant 1 had access to, everyone had access to computers. So participant 1 used the computer for 30 minutes a day, and he had 65th percentile. Participant 2 had 50 minutes a day, and he was in 70th percentile. Participant 3 was 25 minutes a day and was in the 60th percentile. I did that for all 1,000 students. Now we're saying, we're still a correlation. We're looking at the presence of time and the presence of an achievement score. All right, I'm not manipulating anything. I'm not saying you guys do 20 minutes, you guys do an hour, and we'll look at the difference. I'm still just kind of seeing what exists and the relationship between those two variables. But this levels the playing field a little bit more. Now I would have to look at, okay, what are some other variables that might be related to computer time? Well, chances are if you are getting additional like resource minutes, you have less time for computer and your scores are lower because you're getting resource. So it's cyclical. But that's a little bit weaker argument than what we were looking at here. So the type of variables that you are correlating can help determine the significance of your outcomes. All right. The famous correlation example is that as ice cream sales go up, shark deaths go up. So people who eat more ice cream are more likely to die of shark attack. Or as people eat ice cream, people are more likely to die of shark attacks. Those two variables are not related at all, but they are related by a third variable, controlling variable, and that is that it's summertime. As temperature goes up, more people eat ice cream. As temperature goes up, more people go to the beach. As more people are in the beach, shark attacks go up. Or in the water, shark attacks go up. Okay? So we have to be very careful about what our analysis of these correlations are. What correlations can be really, really good for is a starting point. Let's go back to this study. All right, now I've seen that there are participants, or there is some evidence that there is a relationship between the presence of computers and test scores. So now what can I do? Now from this research, I get a grant. and I say, I want to give these 500 students access to computers. And I give them access to computers, and they go up to 60%, not 80%. Then I know, all right, it's more than just access to computers. Something else is going on. But in some other universe, it goes up to 85%. And all I changed was the presence of the computers. Now that seems unrealistic to me. I think that there would be these other variables that would go into play, but these are the types of things that we see in correlational research. Whenever we are measuring just the presence of two things in the environment, we have to be extremely careful about our analysis. The presence, the environment as it exists is not experimental in nature. It is correlational in nature. All right. It's very, very challenging to draw conclusions simply through observing the natural world around us. That control and that manipulation allow us to make the types of causal findings that we look for. With the 10 or so minutes that I have left, I'll try and wrap everything up. But this is why that found with correlational research as kind of the next, not the nexus, but the midpoint to some degree of between quantitative and qualitative, we should be able to see that being able to gather information and draw conclusions based on something like qualitative research can be very, very challenging when we are looking at attitudes toward things, right? There are lots of factors that go into attitudes. There are lots of factors that go into how we feel and how we respond, and especially when we get out of the large group settings and look at individual teachers or communities or students and try to discern things where we're not actually manipulating a specific variable. The ability for a researcher to say, we are all at a starting point, but for this group, I'm going to do something with intentionality. I'm going to see if there is an appreciable difference from my first group. That's the research. That's where we get the information that we can make these sorts of high quality decisions. All right. Does that correlational stuff make sense?
Yes, I understand it more now.
All right, good. Good. So I don't want to leave you guys thinking never do correlational research. I don't want you guys, I can say it for myself. I'm not a fan of qualitative research. I don't see the experimental value in it. The informational value, yes, but experimental value, no. But with correlational research, I challenge you guys to start thinking about the types of findings that you might get from correlational research and how it can be useful in informing your practice, or can it be useful in informing your practice? As you guys are reading the chapter on correlational research, as you're continuing to put together your lit reviews, I guarantee you there's going to be correlational research that you run across. But I want you to start thinking about what really is the value there, and how can it be really meaningful, or can't it be in the field of education? All right. The ability to find causal variables, to me, is so huge. And I know I'm totally biasing your thought process here. But the ability to find causal variables is so significant. And when it comes to either experimental research or single subject research, there are different ways of evaluating whether or not you need to prioritize generality, if you need to prioritize specificity. But the combination thereof is going to get us to a point where we can get some truly significant findings. Correlations, to me, like I said, are a starting point. And I actually, in my dissertation, I did just that. I started with a correlation and I moved to what I hope to be a causal variable. And it helped show that these things do exist together in nature. That's where I think the value is that to show, look, all right, we're starting from a data point. This exists when it's, or doesn't exist, this exists, and it doesn't exist. But we can't stop there. And it's really unfortunate when correlational research, I don't want to say is published that way, but rather when it is interpreted that way. And that's what we have to, I guess at the end of the day, that's what we really have to guard ourselves against, is that false interpretation of what correlational research is actually referring to. All right, I'll get off my high horse there. I'll let the book take over from that point. So read the chapter on correlational research this week. Next week, we will come back and review one more time on putting the entirety of the method section together. And hopefully I can convince a few of you to put together a brief PowerPoint presentation for the following week, and we'll share what we got. All right, any questions, Claire or Sid?
I think I'm good. Sorry, I was trying to unmute it.
Nope, no worries, no worries. All right.
So, oh wait, I do have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you said like a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one, guys, and I will see you next week.
All right.
Bye.